What was the worst decision you saw a friend or family member make? That would be my GF's friend Andrea. Andrea is a nurse at the hospital here, originally from Canada. Anyway, Andrea meets Rodney in the hospital because he comes in after wrecking his motorcycle. They're instantly dating and engaged within a couple of months. When they start talking marriage, the red flags are flying everywhere for me. I grew up where Rodney did and I know where he comes from. Every other sentence out of his mouth is, and if Andrea will co-sign a loan. Ugh. I pull Andrea aside one day on the patio and try to talk to her about this. I begged her to not co-sign any loans. If no bank in the state will loan them money, why would you? I ask of course. She tells me I don't know what I'm talking about and does it anyway. Loans for him. Loans for his mother. Loans for his ex-con buddy who's a really good motorcycle mechanic. Fast forward a year. Rodney is in jail. Again. Andrea had to declare bankruptcy to get away from the bill collectors. Her credit is ruined. The hospital fires her. She has to beg money from her family to scrape up enough to just go back to Canada. Getting a $50 K loan to get her master's at a non-accredited for-profit college. A past neighbor was the dean of the nursing school at a fairly well-known university. I guess it's some sort of post-grad type program similar to med school. IDK how nursing school works. But she apparently had people in her office crying, panicking, confused pretty often because they did all of their undergrad at a non-accredited school and now couldn't get into hers. My parents. My brother is into drugs, and when he was in high school, they told him if he could stay clean for a month, they'd buy him a dirt bike. He stayed clean for a month, so they bought him a brand new dirt bike, helmet, clothes, etc. He got high later that evening, and continued to get high and do drugs every day after. He ended up breaking the bike, but he's learned that he can't manipulate my parents into buying or doing whatever it is that pleases him. Frustrating, really. He's in his late 20s, and an absolute mess. I can see this turning into a cycle of use, get promise of reward, detox, get reward, relapse, repeat. Get released on bail for distribution charges only to reoffend a few hours later and go back to jail, then get out on bail again, reoffend again as well as be in possession of a loaded firearm, as a freaking felon, no more bail. Some people really like jail. A friend got drunk and got into a wreck driving home. He fled the scene on foot and ran all the way home. Cops picked him up at his house soon after. Things haven't been great for him since. My mother, who is in her 70s and lives on Social Security, called me up and said she won $500,000 from Publishers Clearinghouse, which she enters all the time. I told her she did not win. Then she said, all she has to do is send them $6,000 for processing fees. I told her it's a common scam. The next day she said she charged $6,000 to her credit card. Poof, goodbye money. That was many years ago. She still hasn't paid off the card. My grandmother had the same situation occur, with one difference. My grandmother did not contact anybody in the family to tell them because she was directed not to say anything about winning. By the time family members found out what was going on, she was nearly $100,000 in debt and had completely ruined her life. My brother sent $1,400 to a girl in Nigeria for a plane ticket to the States so he could start dating her. Yes, I called him a dumbass. My dad, bless his heart, replaced a bad fuel line on our van with a piece of garden hose. We had a burnt down van 2 days later. Whoa, actual fuel lines from an auto parts store probably would have been cheaper and obviously more effective. My friend decided she was leaving a job earlier than her contract allowed her to. They paid for her relocation fee, so she owed them about $10K at the end of her time there. She was convinced that since she was moving somewhere cheaper with a different job, she would be more than capable of paying them back within a year. She somehow didn't take into account all of the other costs of life and of moving, and has been paying them back for 5 years, complaining about money the whole time. If she had stayed for 6 more months, she wouldn't have owed them anything. Man, I'm gonna try H. Just once. Second part wasn't true. This is why I told myself when I was much younger that I would never experiment with H until I was past 50. Well, I am past 50 now and I still have not tried it. Friend wanted to join the military. Got all his paperwork in and everything and figured it was a done deal. Quit his well-paying job with good benefits, against everyone's recommendations. Went to the physical and they found out he had psoriasis that he thought wouldn't be an issue and he was barred from service. He is currently unemployed. Was already a violent alcoholic. Decided alcohol alone was boring. Dude brings in $100k plus yearly. Started using M. Put his now ex-wife through a door in an argument. She is also on M. That's been 3 years ago. He has not improved. His electricity and water get shut off for non-payment a few times a year and he's about to lose his truck. Goddamn if you didn't just describe my dad and his wife at this exact moment in their lives. Sad. My 72-year-old grandma called me over one day to tell me she was hopping on a plane and wasn't buying a ticket home. She left my grandpa after 50 years of marriage for a man she met online. Things have never been the same between us. My sister and I were really close with our cousins. My family went to Disneyland Paris one day and we went with a camper which we hired from my uncle's camper rental company. After the 4-day trip we went back home and we turned in the camper again. A day later my sister and I realized we both forgot our Nintendo DS in the camper. So my dad called my uncle to ask him if they were still in the camper. My uncle said that they weren't in the camper and that he had no idea where they were. Months later my dad called my uncle again to ask if he had found the Nintendo DS's, to which my uncle replied that he had indeed just found them in the camper. When we got our Nintendos back we immediately wanted to play with them, and immediately saw our cousins' names on all the save files in nearly Eva's game, which obviously proved that my uncle was lying, considering some of the save file dates coincided with the date we turned in the camper. My uncle and my dad got into a big fight because of that, resulting in my sister and I completely losing contact with our cousins. It's about 10 years later and we still have no contact with them. To this day it makes me mad that such a stupid lie has ruined my relationship with my cousins. We moved country to take care of my elderly mother-in-law who was estranged from pretty much everyone. We moved in next door. It was one house split into two which my so owned half of. She had a tantrum over a sack of compost and invoked her right to force the sale of the house. Obviously we lost our home and she slandered us all over town and said she never wanted to see any of us again. So we moved back to original country and obeyed her to the letter. She hasn't seen any of us in more than 2 years and is completely alone. She has to pay for everything she needs and could well be being ripped off by all sorts of people who are smart enough to flatter. She's the very definition of cutting off your nose to spite your face. That sounds so much like my mother. My husband and I are about at the point where we frick off back to Germany and never speak to her again. Friend of my wife's was getting married. I have no idea why, because every time I met her, the friend, all she did was be about her fiance. Well, one day she's complaining that her fiance went out and bought a new car without consulting her and the monthly payment was too much for them to afford. So, to get back at him she bought her own new car. ? The marriage lasted 2 years and both cars got repoed. Went swing dancing to celebrate her official end to a 6-month marriage. They broke off their engagement once. Meets a guy that night and marries him a month later. Becomes 21-year-old divorcee and stepmom to 4 boys she met once before the engagement. She sounds pretty determined to go through life on hard mode, or in stupid mode, not sure which. Everyone has one crazy uncle. My crazy uncle was building a house using settlement money from an on-the-job accident. Purchased land that was lower than anything around it, so it always floods. During construction, saw the contractor was digging a basement. Directed contractor to stop. Contractor pointed out that it was clearly in the contract and the house design made no sense without a basement. Took contractor to court. Contractor agreed no basement. Now has door off of the kitchen that leads nowhere. Contractor arrived to pave the driveway. Uncle didn't trust him and just had him dump the asphalt where the driveway should be. Didn't get around to spreading it before it cured. And now he has a giant lump of asphalt blocking his garage. Decided that he really did want a basement, so started digging it out himself, starting with the aforementioned door off the kitchen. Given that the contractor changed the foundation design to accommodate no basement, this will eventually end up with the foundation slab cracking and perhaps failing, especially since the property floods all the time. That's some home improvement gold right there. Gamble away $250 K plus. It was painful watching him sell their beautiful huge home and rent a crappy apartment. The decision to do nothing. My brother is 38 next month. He's never moved out of my parents' house. Never had a girlfriend. When my dad died 3 years ago he quit his job and has been mooching off my mom ever since. A close friend from high school who had a full ride scholarship to a top 10 university decided that he wanted to drive home after a graduation party out in the middle of nowhere after spending the past 4 hours drinking. Countless people tried to stop him, to grab his keys, but he got confrontational and left. He made it less than a mile down the road before wrapping his car around a tree. Instead of heading off to college at the end of the summer, he went to a long-term care facility. He died 4 years later. A life wasted because he thought he was okay to drive after drinking. Auntie owned a successful pharmacy and got drunk one night and sold some prescription medication on the side for some money. Police found out and was stripped of her license. It got worse when questioned by police. She said it was for herself because she was suffering cancer, which she was not. With all of these accusations published in a prominent newspaper, life ruined, credibility ruined. Sister took a year off work to go on vacation. By vacation I mean sit in her backyard and drink from 10 AM on. Blew through her savings and now, even with a good job, is having a hard time making ends meet. My mom won my dad's house and their divorce 13 years ago. The house was 2 years from being paid off. Instead of my mom working 2 more years, she sold it and retired at 47. She's now in low-income apartments and barely makes it by. My dad always tells us how he wishes we still had the house so me and my sister could have lived there when he moved to retire. I'm glad I'm not the only one with a vindictive rocket scientist for a mother. My mom sold the house, turned around and quit her job and bought a more expensive house. Shockingly, she lost the new house because the mortgage company wanted her to pay them. My family took in a guy we'd known for years. He was the same age as my younger brother and had grown up near us. He fell on some hard times that resulted in his being stabbed by a friend of his. After the stabbing we let him come stay with us. He got clean off the drugs, started exercising, got a new job, and we all spent a lot of time together. He was like a brother to me for a while. He and my brother moved out into an apartment with some other guys from the place they worked. Their apartment was sparse, almost no food in the fridge, and the pride of their place was the collection of empty alcohol bottles they'd saved. It was a bit trashy, but not unexpected for an apartment full of 19-22-year-old single guys. With the new freedom and money coming in from his job, and money from the settlement of the stabbing, he started getting back into drugs. My brother was fine with the weed, hookah, cigarettes, etc., but started drawing lines when he saw harder drugs in the apartment. When my brother saw crack for a second time, he started moving out. The other guys in that place followed suit because they were seeing the change as well. My brother told him that he needed to find new roommates to take over the lease. He brought in his drug dealer. Now my brother is still on the lease for a place he's not actually living in because the drug dealer couldn't be approved by the complex. I'm sure they spotted all the red flags, but the dealer moves in anyway. The two of them start spiraling down and they adopted pit bulls with the idea that the dogs would protect them from anyone trying to evict them because they stopped paying rent. This guy had also been borrowing an old used car from the family of another former roommate and now he refused to give it back. I went with my brother to file a police report about it all. The police were told about the drugs, who was living there, the drugs and more. Luckily, with the police report and some of the guys trying to reason with the complex, most were able to avoid having any of this go on their credit history. I stopped taking to him. I think my brother has seen him maybe once or twice since then and the guy seems to be doing better. He's married with kids now and I haven't heard about any issues through the grapevine. For me, though, I never wanted to get in touch again because it feels like he could easily spiral down again, and when he's like that, he doesn't seem to care who he hurts in the process. Well, my ex-wife may be in an intimate relationship with my deadbeat dad. Does that count? Not an actual friend but someone I grew up near and talk to when we see each other every year or so. After going through her second divorce, a friend decided she wanted kids but never wanted to be married again. First husband didn't want kids, last husband wasn't ready for kids quite yet as they wanted to work on the marriage first. But BC they wouldn't get her pregnant right away. She started divorce proceedings. She met a guy at work that she offhand mentioned she was wanting to be a mom. He mentioned offhand that he'd like to be a dad. So naturally that's how they started sleeping together with the singular goal to get pregnant. Literally because he was the first guy she met that said he'd like to be a dad someday. Not exaggerating, this was the conversation I had with her and this was her answer. 3 weeks later she's pregnant and starts to decide she doesn't really like this guy, but she's so thrilled she's gonna have a baby. Fast forward to having the baby, he's such a great dad. Around the time the baby is 6 months old she absolutely is miserable. They live together and he spends more money than they have on things like stereo systems for his golf cart, plus traveling on weekends with his brother to different golf resorts, while she's working, taking the baby to doc appointments, and struggling to pay rent on their $600 month apartment, etc. Turns out the baby needs extra medical care. BC had inherited some stellar genes from dad. Baby has same issues dad had as a baby. By the time the baby was a year old she was escaping with the baby to her family's home, 3 hours drive away, every single weekend. He starts to follow her out there occasionally and screaming that she's trying to take the baby away from him, etc. She's confided to me at this point that she absolutely hates him, but he's such a good dad. I'm not sure where she gets the standard for good dad, as hers was affectionate and contributed to the household chores and finances rather than draining his wife. Second birthday she announces they're pregnant again. BC she always wanted 2 babies. He's proposed multiple times. She still won't marry him. What an unfortunate roller coaster. Growing up in a small town though, this story is repeated with slight differences all the time. Truly baffling. Buddy of mine got into a fight with the BF of a girl he thought didn't have a BF. She was a piece of work. Anyway, I found out about the BF and he was about 3 times the size of my friend. Dude, just walk away and chalk it up to a learning experience, I said. But nope. He felt this desire to kick his butt. That kind of logic failed me. Anyway, we show up to the designated spot. We just got off work and my friend was a manager and was still wearing a shirt, tie and nice flat bottom leather shoes. The other guy, the BF, dressed to fight, t-shirt, jeans and combat boots. It didn't last long. My friend slipped and slides all over the place while this guy basically held his hand against my friend's forehead to hold him back. The BF actually seemed like a decent sort of guy. He knew my friend was outmatched and was just being a hothead. He basically tells my friend, look, you aren't going to win and why go home with a bloody nose and ruined clothes? But my friend was filled with beer rage. We had a few before the fight began and wanted his comeuppance. Fine, says the BF. He sort of half clocks my friend in the jaw and down he went. He tried to get back up. That's when I jumped in, held him down and told him, don't. I thanked the BF for not killing him and dragged my friend away, all the while he was cursing and swearing at the guy. It was a comedic failure. The BF sounds like a stand-up dude for the most part. I'll write about this one till my dying day, if only so someone might avoid making the mistakes my sister made. Her first bad decision was playing follow the leader with a friend at work. She and the other girl both lost their jobs for time fraud. Second bad decision was in switching from weed to uppers. First it was minor stuff, and then she was using bath salts. A minor seizure seemed to snap her out of it, but by then she was used to the artificial high. She switched to Adderall. Her supplier got her to try other drugs, harder drugs. Adderall stopped working. She found M and the rest of her life became unimportant. Her kids were a burden, and her husband was to blame for everything she saw wrong in her life. He was abusive, but so was she, and she stayed because he had money and she hadn't worked in over 5 years. My parents ignored it. I tried to talk sense into her. It did nothing. She started stealing from our parents. Then she stole from stores. Got really good at it too. She switched from smoking M to shooting it up. I got used to cleaning up after her when she left used needles in the bathroom. She stole my credit cards out of a locked safe when we went on vacation as a family. She went home early. Next day I had hundreds of dollars in charges. She had a new cat. Final straw. My parents and I took my gran on a cruise. 7 days, right before Christmas. It was awesome. We come home and load the suitcases from the car and bring them into my gran's house. Place was trashed. My sister broke in, let her drug dealer stay for the week. Spent over 20 grand of my grand's money. Tried to open new cards after attempting identity theft. Dug through everything in the house. Stole all of the jewelry she could, including stuff from when my gran was a kid. Police were called. In time that followed, she was arrested for shoplifting and crashes 3 cars, once with her daughter in the front seat. They finally found the drugs. She couldn't lie her way out of that, so finally she was sent packing to prison. She spent roughly 4 months there before being moved to a rehab center. She has a slew of mental disorders, addictions, etc. She can see her kids for a few hours on the weekend. Our parents can visit her. I won't. I don't have it in me to see her. She was my best friend, but I don't know her now. I haven't known her in years. I don't forgive her for the hurt. I still see a spoiled brat who blames everyone but herself. It'll be a long time before I talk to her again. This needs to be done more often. There's only so much you can forgive when the person continues to act selfishly. While addiction is terrible, people still need to be held accountable for their actions even when addiction is involved. My brother was sober for 8 months when him and his equally toxic girlfriend decided it would be a good time to have a baby. Their girl is the happiest little thing, healthy and hitting all the milestones. However, he started drinking again 2 months before she was born, and the mother is literally the dumbest and most oblivious person I have ever met in my life. The two of them are beyond toxic to each other, and it's only a matter of time before she starts growing up and understanding how horrible they are to each other. I watched a friend throw a brick up in the air and over a railing, then proceed to lean over the railing to see the brick fall, to then be cracked in the head by said brick. Multiple family members continuously taking various things from my grandma's house, then acting like she's crazy when she says anything about her stuff going missing. She's 94 and still lives alone. She's a sharp lady and knows what's going on. I guess some of them feel guilty about it, because things just mysteriously show back up. Legitimate gaslighting, and to someone who is at an age where they may be more likely to distrust their own memory, too. That's disgusting. Okay, my mom is a mostly functional alcoholic. A few years ago she came down with some minor sickness and the doctor gave her some pills for it. I don't remember the specifics. She took her medication, drank a glass of wine and felt fine, so the next night she takes her pills and downs a bottle and a half. The next morning my mom comes down the stairs stumbling, obviously still absolutely hammered. I've never seen her wake up still drunk, so I think it may have had something to do with the pill, but I have no idea. At the time I was going to a school out of town, so I needed my mom to drive me to the bus stop. I tried to convince my mom not to take me, but it was no dice. She's a nasty lady when she's drunk, and she said I was being a lazy bee and just didn't want to go to school. I concede and go to wait for her in the car. 5 minutes later my mother comes out completely naked from the pants down. I saw my mother's pubes and it still makes me cry when I'm alone at night. Anyway, she gets in the driver's seat and starts yelling at me, basically blaming me that she peed herself and couldn't find a single pair of pants or underwear in the laundry room. I try to convince her to go to her room and find some pants, but she says if we stay any longer I'll miss the bus. Surprise surprise, albeit her phenomenal decision making skills, we pull up to the bus stop and the bus is long gone. So my mother, instead of doing the smart thing, going back to our house, getting pants and driving me to school, she decides if she went this far naked she can drive another 45 minutes that way. So after a very long, swervy and terrifying drive we finally start to near the exit. Then my mom's tire rolls over something and boom, it exploded completely. My mother, determined that I get my education, continues driving on the rim of her tire for another 5 minutes. Meanwhile, people are shouting at us out their windows, honking and motioning for us to pull over. As expected, we got pulled over. My mom is freaking out trying to find a towel or a blanket, anything to cover herself, but she had no such luck. The cop comes over and she has no choice but to roll down her window. The first thing out of his mouth is license and registration, PLMAAM. Are you wearing pants? Your dad must have been a hell of a guy if your username was inspired by him and not your mom. Friend of mine moved 10 hours away and transferred colleges for a girlfriend. She broke up with him within 2 weeks of him living there. Brother married a one-night stand, he got pregnant. Same. And now they are going through a nasty divorce, as my wife and I predicted years ago when he got married. It was pretty obvious to people not extremely close to them that they weren't really that compatible. We opposed him marrying her and it actually caused a rift in our family. Now he's actually come back around and realized his mistakes and our relationship is a lot better. I never really knew my first cousin once removed, but I guess he has always been struggling with depression and that sort of thing. He turned to drugs, H mostly, as a means of self-medication. He had been clean for a while. He seemed to have kicked it, but one night, a sketchy friend of his hung out with him at my great aunt's house. Since my first cousin ounce removed still lived with his mother, he was 25. Apparently, they both shot up. After a while, his sketchy friend left, and I guess my cousin thought he could handle the amount he used to be able to, but he couldn't. He died that night, and wasn't found until his dad came until his room the morning after, looking for him, because he just bought themselves tickets to see Star Wars The Last Jedi. Whoa, that last part was really heart-wrenching. Sorry OP. My cousin totally bought into the gangster rapper lifestyle. He was a Hispanic kid adopted into a middle-class family that adopted kids from Mexico, Yemen and Haiti. He had every chance he could have asked for, but was obsessed with being a thug and being gangster. I kinda saw it coming, but in our teens he just kind of disappeared. Stopped seeing him at family gatherings. Nobody talked about him, it was like he never existed. A few years ago I decided to do some digging. He was convicted of B&E and intent to distribute in his teens and did a few years in juvie. Got out and was convicted of grand theft less than a year later. He got out last spring and as far as I know hasn't talked to any family. I still have friends who know him, and I guess he's selling coke now. On one hand it's really sad to know someone I was close to is down such a destructive path, but in the other, he literally chose it. He didn't live in poverty. He wasn't flunking school. He was just lazy and wanted to be dangerous, so I kinda don't give a crap. The thug life didn't choose him, he chose the thug life. You have been visited by the skilled papa. Reply Jit God Papa for good skill. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.